I'm Mark Mapstone. I'm an associate professor of neurology, and I'm a co-director of our memory care clinic. Certainly the brain changes as you get older, and one of the main things that we know that happens is the processing speed, or the rapidity with which you can take information in and do something with it, slows down as we get older. And this is probably due to different changes in the neurons and the cells in the brain. In general, older people do remember as much as younger people do when given enough time to encode the information and to retrieve it. And so as we get older, the focus really is to enhance those capacities. And one of the things that we can do is increase our processing speed. Technology these days has made some demands on us that makes it difficult for older adults who aren't used to them to pick them up quickly. If you're a child today or a teenager and you've got your PDA, like my children do, they're going to be growing up knowing how to use this. And they're probably going to develop different brain systems or different proficiencies than people who didn't grow up with these devices. These devices place a lot of demands on multitasking. You've got to be able to take information in rapidly and then switch to another task. And so there's this sort of short burst of activity that's required. And if we think about what we know about brain aging, that's precisely the trouble that people have as they get older, is trouble flexibly going from one task to another, and also taking in information in a speeded way. So one avenue for improving older adults' abilities to do and work with technology would be to focus on issues of processing speed and multitasking, cognitive flexibility. So often I get asked, when you go back to school as an older adult, are things harder when you're sitting in class with that 18-year-old in college? Are things really that much harder, or does the younger person have a leg up on you because of different brain resources? And in general, the brain develops through childhood and through different stages. And each stage is specialized for the development of different areas of the brain. And so, for example, in a young child, the language centers are very plastic and ready to be developed. And the language that they are exposed to as an infant is the one that brain sort of sucks up and takes in, because that brain structure is ready for that. As the brain develops, though, that structure becomes less and less receptive to those sorts of changes. And so there are critical developmental periods in the developing brain where certain activities or certain skills, certain bits of information, the brain is more ready to take those in and use them. Once we reach our 20s to mid-20s into our 30s, the brain has sort of crystallized a bit. It's sort of set up its networks that it's going to be using throughout life. That doesn't mean that the brain is not plastic. The brain can make changes. The brain can adapt to new things and create new networks, and neurons can talk to different neurons as we get older. But the short answer is that the 40-year-old is going to have a different sort of challenge, and that is that the brain is not really set up to learn the information like an 18-year-old brain is. There's a diversity of connections in an 18-year-old brain that become pruned and shaved down, and these networks are set up during that developmental period. And by the time you're 40 or 50, it's going to be harder. That doesn't mean that you don't have resources available to you. What you do have are very efficient ways of handling information that you've developed over 40, 50 years of your life. And so that you have different perspectives that the 18-year-old doesn't have. And so you can use those, hopefully, in a way to get the information at an equivalent level. It's just going to be by a different mechanism. So one of the things that I always end up with my patients in clinical situations is really just a word of encouragement about the idea that you have a lot of control over the way that your brain ages. And as we're learning, it's more in the 40s and 50s and through midlife where you can exert the majority of that control. But that doesn't mean that when you hit 70 or 80 that you can't do something. And one of the main things you can do is keep yourself in good physical fitness and good physical health. You can also do a lot of different cognitive tasks to strengthen those connections. We're learning now that the brain can make new connections throughout life, and you can do this by challenging the brain to work in ways that it's not used to.